Hello everyone and welcome back to Argentine Asado. Today in this grilling session we are going to be grilling two pieces of meat, and these two cuts of meat are very distinct. The first is the picanha, and the picanha is known as sirloin cap or also rump cap, but for the purpose of this video I'm going to go with sirloin cap. And the picanha is very well known and very famous in Brazil, and in recent years here in Latin America it has become more and more recognized and well known, and also throughout the world. Now the picanha is a really interesting muscle group because it's not as big as a full rump and it's not as small as a tri-tip, but what makes it very distinct is this layer of fat that you see on one side, and then you have this very thin layer of membrane on the other. Now why I like this cut of meat is that it's really tasty, and that fine layer of fat provides a really good taste. The second piece of cut, the second cut that we're going to do today is the entraña, and the entraña is also known as skirt steak, is a really famous cut in Argentina, and it is really thin, so you have to be very careful with the heat. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be firing up the barbecue. As you can see, we're going to be doing, first we're going to be cooking the entraña, and then we're going to move over to cooking the picanha. And obviously with that, we're going to have some sausages, we're going to have some grilled provolone cheese, and probably a salad. So stay tuned, I'm going to go and light the fire. Okay guys, as you know, here in Argentina, we cook with, majority of our barbecues, we are cooking them with wood. And today I have piquichin, which there is an article on my blog. I'll put the image and the link below. Piquichin is a real hardwood, and what makes it so important is that it provides really good embers. These embers contain heat with, between 25 and 40 minutes, allowing you to grill comfortably with a really good taste, nice smoky taste, but at the same time really good quality and consistent heat. So as always, I've started my fire. I always say that a good asado or a good barbecue starts with a good fire. So I've created my fire, I've used some kindling, and obviously we're gonna light it now, and then once the fire has really gained traction and we've got some embers, we'll be moving the embers under the grill to create a substantial heat, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then we'll put on our picanha and our entraña. Stay tuned, come on. Okay guys, so as always, be careful when you're lighting your fires. I always use a good amount of kindling to really get the fire going and really start burning through these really hard woods. Now if you don't have piquichin where you are locally, you can use some other fruit woods. Apple wood is a good option, cherry wood is also, and of course hickory. Okay guys, so how am I going to prepare my picanha and my entraña? The first thing is we are going to be doing the picanha in steaks, so I'm going to be cutting this around 1.5 inches each steak. But what is the key here? The key is to look at the direction of the fiber and then cut accordingly to that. This is going to, and it's not always going to be vertical with the shape or the cut of your picanha. So in this case, you can see that the grain is going this way. So I'm going to try to follow that grain as much as possible. Now, for the entraña, what I'm going to be doing is removing this membrane. And I'm also going to be cutting this small line of fat away from the meat. And I'm going to be leaving this membrane on this side as it is. And on the other side, I'm going to be removing this membrane. So one side you're going to keep the membrane, which is pretty thin. It's actually more of a fatty membrane. And this side I'm going to be removing it completely. This is going to allow it to be a lot more tender and also really get that heat in there, because both of these we're going to be cooking at pretty high temperature, which isn't what we're doing traditionally here in the Argentine grilling space. Just generally a long process. Today is going to be max 45 minutes. So it's going to be pretty short. And the importance of this is that you don't want to overcook your entraña, and you definitely don't want to overcook your picanha. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is removing the membrane from one of the sides of the entraña. Now, you have to be careful here because sometimes your entraña will be so small and so thin that if you pull the membrane away too quickly, it will actually disrupt the fibers of the meat. Now, one last thing I didn't mention before, which I think is really important that everyone who is going to be cooking these types of meat, that they should do is rest your meat for at least 1 hour before putting it on the barbecue. Don't go ahead and take cold meat from the fridge and directly onto the barbecue. It's not going to be a good situation. And then the last thing is, if you are buying vacuum packed picanha, which is probably most likely you will be, make sure that you take it out of the pack a good time in advance before you put it on the barbecue. This is going to allow the meat to breathe. And when you put your salt and pepper on, or whatever spices you're using, if you are, it's important that you have the meat at room temperature a good amount of time before. That, my friends, is a clean piece of skirt steak or entraña. And here you can see that I have cut up the picanha, your sirloin cap or your rump cap, into really nice 1.5 inch thick steaks. And as you can see, you've got this nice thin line of fat running on one side, and then you've got the meat, which is pretty consistent marbling. It's not over marbled, but it is pretty consistent. Okay guys, so as always, I have created the fire here on the left, as you can see, and I am waiting for the coals to drop, or the embers to drop below the fire, and then I'm going to move them under the grill. Now, I've already put my sausages on, and I have this like spear, which is way easier for turning them each side. These are pork sausages with red pepper, cheese, and a few spices, so they're really, really, really good. Okay guys, so the fire is going pretty well. I've already got some coals under the sausages, as you saw before, and I've sliced up the picanha, and I've also prepared the entraña. So what I'm gonna do now is a technique which again is very personal. You don't have to do this at home, but I like to do it, is I take a bit of olive oil and you massage it into the meat before applying my salt. And the reason for me doing this is it helps absorb the salt more consistently across the meat, and it also prevents the meat from sticking to your grill when you put it on the hot grill. At this stage, what I am doing is I am putting the meat, the steak, the picanha steak, on the grill. Now, just to get the temperature right, you should be able to hold your hand over that grill for anywhere in between 5 and 8 seconds. You don't want the grill to be not hot enough, and you definitely don't want the grill to be scorching so you completely burn your picanha steak. So I'm laying these steak horizontally to the barbecue, and as I said, you should be able to hold your hand over that heat for between 5 and 8 seconds. So now the picanha and my entraña are on the barbecue. You should be able to see by now that there are some red juices coming through the top of that steak, and that is absolutely perfect. So I've already salted the steak before putting it on, so I've left it on there for around 5 to 10 minutes to really heat up on one side before I turn it over. Okay, so after around 8 to 10 minutes, I am ready to turn over my steak, and as you can see here, the steak has already been turned over, and I have salted the steak now on the other side. And again, I keep the heat very consistent. You should be able to hold your hand over there for 5 to 8 seconds, but don't go overboard with the heat, because if not, you're gonna burn the very thin entraña, which isn't a very thick piece of meat, and so therefore if you go overboard with the heat, all you're going to do is burn the entraña and dry it out. So as you can see, when I push down on the top surface of the steak, you can see this transparent juice start to flow through to the top. Now this is really good news. It's very important that you get to see those juices and you also become sensitive to recognizing them when they flow through, because this is going to be a good way for you to gauge how long you want to keep your steak on, depending on if you want it to be rare, medium, or well done. In this case, we're going for a medium well done, and I have kept the steak on either sides for around 8 minutes on this heat, so the steak will be medium when I take it off.
So as always, my camera ran out of battery, so excuse the audio. I've just taken it off the grill, and the key here is to let the steak, the picanha and the entraña, sit for around 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes. If you can wait 10 minutes, it's better, but let it sit for a bit to really let the juices get back into the fiber, because when they cook, they obviously go up because of the heat, and so when you let them sit, the juices go back to where they should be. Okay guys, so taking the steak off, we have the picanha steak and we have the entraña, and as you can see, I've just cut the first piece, and let's do a tender test. Looks good. Perfect. The picanha is such a unique taste, very different from everything else I think that we taste here. And now we're going to go and taste the entraña. Stay tuned.